history of branding goes hand in hand with colonialism, racism and imperialism. So in the late 19th century, prior to commodity racism, which is basically the process of using branded goods to promote racist ideologies, racism was taught through scientific racism, where essentially the institutions promoted the idea that black people and brown people were considered to be inferior, and science could prove this. That's essentially what was done. But the weakness with scientific racism, according to the so-called colonizer, was that scientific racism was really only accessible to, say, like the middle class and higher, because scientific racism was only available to those who, one, had access to education and books and could actually read and write, which was really a select group of people in that era, whereas we can all read and write pretty much now. So scientific racism could only reach a small portion of society. So branding came in and changed the game completely, because it had the power to communicate with everyone. You know, the everyday Joe on the street. It wasn't complex. It meant that you could communicate through symbols, not just reading and writing. Soap was one of the biggest commodities that was used to promote racism, and it served as the perfect symbolic metaphor for this idea that white was right and anything that wasn't white was, you know, barbaric and dirty and awful. So soap was often used as this almost magical gift that could turn black and brown people into the civilized white superior people, or almost turn them into the white civilized superior person. Colonialism is the act of dominating a group of people, the physical act. So dominating a group of people through any means necessary, whether that's through war, through invasion, through enslavement, anything. Whereas we have this other term, imperialism, which is the ideology that supports the act of colonialism, if that makes sense. So imperialism was the thing that said these black and brown people are inferior and therefore they need to be subject to the domination of the superior white people. And then you have this thing called the civilizing mission that takes imperialism to the next level. It's the narrative of imperialism. The civilizing mission is basically a story that's painted by the colonizer that says that black and brown people are inferior, white people or the West are superior, and are subsequently burdened with, say, like the moral obligation to civilize the dark savages of the world. So one of the most famous campaigns of this type that I'm talking about is a campaign that depicts a black boy in a bath being washed by a white boy, and it's with Pear's soap. The soap is again kind of like given these magic powers that are able to transform this black boy into a white boy. In 2014, you see Nivea bring out the campaign Look Like You Give a Damn. Now, one of their images was a picture of a black man who has a shaven head, and he's holding his former head, which happens to be sporting an afro in his hand, and he's getting ready to throw the afro head into the distance. And in bold, the caption says, "Re-civilize yourself." Now, of course, when you understand the civilizing mission, you also understand that the afro and dark skin was something that was attacked, that was part of colonialism and imperialism. You recognise just how problematic that brand campaign is. But when you recognise that there's a deeper history behind it, these things can't just be overlooked. And I think that any people dealing with brand campaigns have to have enough social awareness to recognise the responsibility they have, and to also avoid signing off messages like those, because they are deeply entrenched with a history that can't be ignored as far as I'm concerned. But then the same thing goes for us. We are all collectively feeding this. You know, the Dove advert, a black woman was cast to do that. I think generally speaking we are not educated enough, else we wouldn't be doing these things. We wouldn't be casting ourselves within these, or responding to casting calls and allowing ourselves to perpetuate these messages. Part of the problem is not just that we consume or continue to consume, but that we protest to begin with, that we're actually asking these brands to change, and if that makes sense, that just if they change their messaging then we continue to consume. I think we have to recognise that there is a general level of complacency with brands anyway, and that really what I would like to see happen is more independent brands taking the lead and showing the bigger brands how it should be done. And the potential power that comes with branding, because I don't think 2018 and beyond is about begging these big brands to change. We have so much power now with social media. I think it's about time the smaller brands start to step up, and just show people what can be done with good brand messaging.